to actually share whatever optimism you have developed about betterment of society and the relief of social injustices. Whereas if you can take action by sharing your hopefulness in your everyday life, by recognizing that you see the world positively, project this hopefulness, then your life is going to have a bit of an impact, and it will not be wasted. The world does have problems. If we attack them with goodwill and with hope, we'll be able to make an impact here and there around the edges of these problems. I'm Gus Nossal. I'm an Australian medical scientist, and I share hope.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
It is truly a delight for me. It really is. Make sure that I get this right. I'm horrible at pronouncing any other name but my own. And so I want to make sure that I hear yours right.
I think you should just call me Gus.
Gus. All right.
Everybody does.
Okay. I really appreciate that. Well, Gus, let me jump into the interview then. You're extremely well known in the world of immunology, and most people in the world are probably not as aware of immunology as they should be because they don't realize how much it impacts their everyday life. But you are an Order of the British Empire. You've been knighted in the British Empire. You are a Companion of the Order of Australia. You won the Albert Einstein World Award of Science. This list goes on and on. I'm just looking through Wikipedia and website after website after website about.
You don't want to believe everything you read, Chris.
Well, if it's in the internet, it must be true, right?
Let me tell your colleagues, all of us in the I Share Hope podcast, just a little bit more about immunology, and that will also segue into telling you a little bit more about myself.
Good.
I have actually had two professional lives. They're related, but they're different. Now, the first goes on for 40 years, and that was me as a medical research worker in the field of immunology. What is immunology? Immunology, simply put, is a study of the natural defense system of the body, that which you have within you that keeps you free of disease, that allows vaccines to work, and that also even provides a certain bulwark against cancer. Now, that natural immune system is based on cells that we call white cells of the blood, and if you want to be a bit technical, they're called lymphocytes. And would you believe that I've spent 40 years of my misspent life studying those damn little white cells that are keeping you in free of disease?
I really appreciate that. It's working.
From the point of view of saying, how does it work? Why is it so? That which in the trade we call fundamental research. And that is really, as it were, the first and probably the most important part of my life. However, there is a second thread. And I was extremely lucky to be in possession of this second thread when I came to my retirement 19 years ago, and therefore was no longer able to conduct laboratory bench research. And that is related to the importance of immunology in public health. Now, this comes with a little bit of a story, a little bit of a self-story attached to it. I guess as a person of hope, I've always had a bit of a bleeding heart. And would you believe, since about 1964, I've been on a variety of World Health Organization committees, trying to see how can this knowledge that I've accumulated benefit the people in the developing countries. They don't enjoy the same high standard of health that we do in the West, and they definitely can benefit tremendously from some of the tools that medical research has provided, particularly in the field of vaccines. So this significant part-time involvement in vaccines, in advocacy for third world health, in trying to boost up life expectancy in the third world was a minor thread while I was actually earning a salary. But I had the good fortune of being able to make my night job my day job when I retired and really concentrate full-time on global public health. Now, there and then, fate took an entirely unexpected hand. And if you want to talk about hope, this is about as hopeful a thing as could have happened to anyone. Would you believe that someone or another from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation cottoned onto my name and said, oh, here's good old Gus, he's been on this WHO kick for so long. Why don't we make him the chairman of the Strategic Advisory Committee or Council of the Bill and Melinda Gates Children's Vaccine Program?
Wow.
Now, the foundation is a quite amazing body. It spends close to $4 billion a year for the welfare of humankind. And Bill Gates is on record as saying that this immunization project, which I had the enormously good fortune of helping to bring into the world, I was one of the obstetricians for the project, is the most successful thing he's ever done. It's the most successful program of the Gates Foundation. And that's, it's got a technical name. Its technical name is the Gavi Alliance. That simply means the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. And that has brought vaccines to countless millions of people and saved countless lives. Now, isn't that a little story that gives you hope?
That really is. Well, Sir Gus, thank you for letting me call you Gus. I'm sure I shouldn't be, but I really appreciate your graciousness. That's incredible, really incredible. So you've been involved with Gates Foundation for how long then?
Well, funnily enough, I was actually in its prehistory because this appointment started in 1997 and the major launch of the foundation wasn't until the year 2000. But I'll tell you a funny little story. The very first announcement from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation which wasn't really yet a properly constituted foundation, was that it would be giving $56 million to the cause of global immunization. And I got wind of this from my WHO standpoint. And I said, gosh, that's pretty good, 56 million, better than a kick in the pants. And then the spin doctors got onto the situation. And they said to Bill Gates, you're Bill Gates. You're the world's richest man. You can't announce this gift for immunization as 56 million. It's got to be 100. It's got to be 100 million. And I found myself in this incredible situation on the 2nd of December, 1997, at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York, in front of a bank of, I kid you not, at least 100 cameras, still cameras, television cameras, with 4 people on the platform: Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, Carol Bellamy representing UNICEF, and poor old Gus representing the World Health Organization. And we all gave speeches, and I will leave it to your listeners to decide who gave the best speech. And I will also tell you that that wasn't the person who got reported in the newspapers and the television the next day, which you can also guess.
Well, I'm glad that we got to talk to you, who probably gave the best speech that day.
But it wasn't a totally amazing thing. Now, we moved on from there, and you will probably find it difficult to believe that by the time we got to the official launch of the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization at Davos at the World Economic Forum in beginning of year 2000, the sum had gone up to 750 million and increased very considerably since then. Of course, for something as important as global immunization, others had to come in, and now it's strongly supported by the aid agencies of the world, and it's approximately a $2 billion a year program.
Unbelievable, really. And how many countries are you impacting right now?
Well, it was a decision taken quite early that we would take the 73 poorest countries in the world, those at that time with a GDP of less than $1,000 per head of population per year. That threshold has since gone up to $1,500, but it's definitely targeted to the poor.
Wonderful. I'm so thankful for you. Seriously, I know that doesn't just impact the poor families and individuals around the world. It has to trickle into even the more well-developed nations.
Well, that's right. And, if you now move on from vaccines to other forms of therapy, like, for example, the antiretroviral therapy for HIV/AIDS, the programs have very much gone not just to the poor countries, but to the middle-income countries. And as we sit here today, some 13 billion people are benefiting from the extraordinary twin programs called the President's Emergency Fund for AIDS Relief, that's called PEPFAR, arguably the best thing that George W. Bush ever did, and the other one called the Global Fund, to fight HIV, AIDS, and tuberculosis. Between them, they are giving these antiretrovirals to a very large number of people. And so that AIDS is no longer a death sentence, it is now a controllable disease.
Wonderful. Well, you're going to be great at answering these questions. Let me jump in here. Let's hear what the answers are. So question number 1, how do you define hope, or what is your favorite hope quote?
Look, I'm going to be incredibly conventional here and just use the common one, namely hope springs eternal in the human breast. Why do I say that? Because all of these programs that relate to improving the health and well-being of humankind are one of these sorts of glass half empty, glass half full sorts of stories. I happen to be a glass half full person. I've always been a person that's been an optimist. I've always been a person who has hope. And let me give you one stunning, I think absolutely stunning fact about this. Let's talk about a very sad subject, namely death in childhood from disease. Deaths below the age of 5. Now, in 1960, when I was just a young doctor, there were 20 million deaths per year in the world in children under 5. Today, there are 6 million. And that is, of course, from a much larger pool because the world's population has increased markedly in those 50 years.
Wow.
Now, isn't that an example of hope?
It's tremendous.
And isn't that an example of a glass half full? There's a long distance to go. Those 6 million are still far too many deaths. And as a matter of fact, the rate of deaths of children under 5 in the developing countries is 13 times that in the rich industrialized countries. So, of course, the glass is also half empty. But with hope, we can continue that trajectory. And 2015 is the year of the Millennium Development Goals. We're going to have to start a whole heap of new goals. And in this particular case, the goal is to halve that number of deaths again in the next 15 years.
Brilliant. That's really great news. And that's one thing we really don't hear that much about from the media is how good we're doing at changing things. But that's really encouraging to hear you say that.
Well, you're absolutely right, Chris. I mean, the fact of the matter is the media likes sensationalistic stuff. The media one way or another, tend to focus on bad news. And here is what you could really call a global good news story, dependent to a large extent on something that many people don't understand. It's dependent on foreign aid. And a lot of people think, foreign aid, that's just a way of squandering money on dictators and third world countries who squirrel it away in Swiss bank accounts. Now, I'm not going to deny that a little bit of that may go on, but overwhelmingly, that portion of aid which is spent in the health field is spent well and achieves these remarkable results.
Wow. Thank you for being in oversight of all those dollars going to really good things. Question 2, who has given you in your life the most hope?
Yes, well, since I saw your excellent outline, I've been giving that a bit of thought, and I'm going to speak to you about 2 mentors, both of whom were very different, both of whom have given me hope, and both of whom have had a profound influence on my life. We'll start with my boss in the basic research field. He's a chap called Sir Burnett. He's arguably Australia's greatest scientist and a Nobel laureate. And he also was a fundamental scientist. His most extensive work was in the field of viruses, and he actually invented the techniques whereby our annual influenza vaccine is manufactured, and lots of other things in the virus field. He also turned his attention to the immune response to viruses and therefore to the field of immunology, and became a very widely known scientist. And he, who was a completely different type of person to me because he was an introvert, he was aloof, he was quite stern, not particularly approachable, but a wonderful lateral thinker. He himself went down this pathway of working on WHO committees, although he was not at all a natural committee person, quite the reverse. He was really rather inarticulate. But he gave me the feeling that, well, if you're blessed to spend a lifetime in research, you should really think about the world and those with less advance than yourself. Now, as I say, he was a lateral thinker. He was not a particularly quick thinker, interestingly enough. He was no good answering questions at seminars, no good at explaining things in an open forum, but fantastic when you gave him a problem that he could take away and bring back the solution in a day or two's time after he'd had the chance to think about it in his study and really come up with original, fantastic, extraordinary insights. So that was Burnett. And he gave me hope that, my goodness, I can't hold a candle to his ability in research. But if I study hard and work hard under him, I might be able to be a pale shadow of that very extraordinary person.
Wonderful.
Well, in any case, I was lucky enough to make some interesting research findings. And as a result of that, for my postdoctoral period, I was asked to go to Stanford University. And although I initially went as a postdoc, quite soon my second mentor and second boss there, I might describe in a moment, said, look, it'll look better on your curriculum vitae if we make you an assistant professor. And here was I at the wonderfully ripe age of 28 years old as an assistant professor of genetics at arguably the world's second most prestigious university, Stanford University,
wow,
in their new medical school. Well, what was this boss? Who was this second hope giver? Who was this second mentor? This was a chap called Josh Lederberg.
Wow.
If Burnett was slow, this chap had a lightning fast mind. He was penetratingly intelligent. He was an incredible polymath. And in fact, so extraordinary was he that he was the second youngest person ever to win a Nobel Prize in medicine. Second youngest person ever. He won at the age of 33.
Wow.
The youngest was James D. Watson of Watson and Crick fame, who was all of 32. So Lederberg had this fantastic capacity to so incisively come to grips with a problem that almost before you had the sentence out of your mouth, he'd say, yes, go on, I've understood that. Now tell me, what's the bottom line? And, you know, it was a very, very interesting contrast to the other guy who was more of a dreamy, deep-thinking, inner type of person. Here was Lederberg, who was very, as it were, external. Now, the amazing thing about Lederberg is when he won his Nobel Prize, it had maybe not exactly a very good effect on his life. He somehow felt he shouldn't do this genetic research anymore, where in the 10 years he'd made so many discoveries that he won the Nobel Prize. And he shifted to other things, some of which he wasn't that good at. He shifted from Stanford University to New York, where he became director of the Rockefeller University, which is, of course, a people-style job, president and director of the Rockefeller. And as I say, he wasn't quite as good at that. But while his mind was so active, he also broadened incredibly. Now, let me tell you the sort of thing he did. He founded the science of exobiology. Exobiology means the search for life outside the Earth and the solar system.
Wow.
And he devised all sorts of extraordinary instruments which went up on those Apollo missions and had, inter alia, the idea of, can we get organic molecules from space? Can we get some stuff from the moon that might have life on it? And, of course, no such life was found. So he founded that discipline. He was also very, very interested in war and peace, and became, in a fairly secret way, an advisor to a succession of presidents on nuclear warfare and the nuclear threat, simply because he could study up on a subject like that and come to grips with, what the facts were so extraordinarily and so quickly that that president after president wanted to seek his advice. Anyhow, Lederberg was very good to me. He pretty much left me alone, but was always there with an instant solution to any problem that I couldn't puzzle out myself.
Well, you've put yourself in great company, and I'm impressed with two things. One, that those two gentlemen gave time to a younger colleague, because so many people get busy. And the second thing I'm impressed with is that you're willing to give time to me. I'm not a scientist, obviously, but you're sharing your insight. And I can't tell you how much that means to the next generation.
Well, that's very kind of you, and I think what you're doing here is really interesting, because this world needs hope, We have a confronting series of problems before us. And, you can take one of two positions. You can say, oh, God, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and, I want to get off. Or you can say, yes, the world does have problems if we attack them with goodwill and with hope. Maybe we won't be able to solve them all, but we'll be able to make an impact here and there around the edges of these problems.
I'm sure of it. Question 3. Have you had hopeless times in your life? And if so, kind of paint that picture. Talk about you for a minute. How have you used hope to get through?
Yes, well, look, I'll share a story here that not many people know. It was the most hopeless time of my life, and it was entirely unexpected. But as a young doctor and starting my research career, I suddenly got a phone call from Adelaide, which is a smaller city than Melbourne in the south of Australia, in South Australia. Your brother's very sick. And to cut a long story short, I hopped on a plane. I found my brother very sick indeed. I had to figure out a way of getting him into hospital. And putting it bluntly, he had a fatal illness. And this brother was a kind of a hero of mine, because he wasn't medical, he was scientific, he was a biochemist. He'd become a reader in biochemistry, which is the equivalent of an associate professor, at a very young age, was destined to have a very stellar career. A disease struck him down, and he died about 18 months later. And I must say that was, in a way, the darkest thing that ever happened to me. Because, of course, my parents died. My father actually wasn't particularly old. He was only 68. But it was at a time of life when life expectancy was shorter, and he'd had a turbulent, difficult, but essentially good life. My mum lived to 82. Both of those were big losses. But that was a period of you ask why. Why is it so? Why is a life cut so short that had so much promise?
And did you get an answer for that question?
Well, I guess the answer's, hidden in the skies there. It's very difficult to figure out where something like that comes from. And I've just been, so incredibly lucky in my own life. I mean, your questionnaire asks, have I ever had discrimination, childhood trauma, etc., addiction, bullying, illness, injury? Look, I'm a migrant. I left Austria at the age of 7 with my parents, who were fleeing from the Holocaust period. But I have to tell you this. Yes, of course there were bits of discrimination. Of course there were a few people who would jostle you in the street and said, "Get out of my way, Jew boy," or who would say something like, "You're a bloody refugee." That's what we call them here. Refugees were bloody refugees. But this was minor, absolutely minor, in comparison with the love and friendship and openness and welcoming that we got from the Australian people in those dark days of World War II. Absolutely minor in comparison with an overwhelmingly good reception. So, in fact, I had a very happy childhood. And I've never had anyone put a roadblock in my path, or I've never had the feeling I had to grind towards success through trampling on other people. I've been helped rather than hindered, and from that point of view, very, very few periods of hopelessness.
Wonderful. Well, it's a great story, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. And it's great to hear that the Australian people in those times were such kind people. I hear the same thing about them now, and I think that's just a wonderful example of how we can be to our community around us, globally or locally.
Exactly.
Question 4, sir. How are you sharing hope today?
Well, what am I actually doing now to give others hope? I've mentioned to you the Third World Health work, particularly with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Funnily enough, you will laugh at this, Chris, about 7 minutes before you rang, the president of Philanthropy Australia rang me, and I said, "Oh, God, am I going to get rid of him in 7 minutes? Because Chris is going to ring at 11 a.m. sharp." And he gave me the good news that Philanthropy Australia, which is the peak body for philanthropy in this country, has just appointed a new chief executive. And he gave me all the outline of who this person was. Now, I'm enormously lucky to actually be the patron of Philanthropy Australia. And in that context, I've become very involved with not only philanthropic giving, which is important, but with a wide variety of volunteering activities. As a matter of fact, you might be interested in some statistics here. The United States is the most generous nation in the world as far as actual financial contributions to philanthropy are concerned, something like 2% of GDP. Australia is at about 1/2 of that. But I think it makes up for it by countless hours of people, from little people right up to top professionals, giving their time voluntarily to charitable work, to a wide variety of volunteer activities that create hope. And, we don't have to go into these. They can be very small things, like the Wheels on Meals program, for example, where meals are brought to elderly people by volunteers, and right up onto major foundations and major activities. So I'm very involved in that, and more as, again, at this stage of the game, more as a booster, an advocate, spokesperson. I give an unbelievable number of talks on this and related subjects, including, of course, the subjects which I love most, which is the immunization programs and the health programs.
Wonderful. It's such a great example of not only the big things that we see on the front page of the newspaper with the big gifts or the big name like yours volunteering for something, but the little acts, the meals on wheels where the person you go see in that house may not have a clue who you are and what you do on a daily basis, but it means so much to talk to you as a person for 5 minutes. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Question 5 then, how can we take action by sharing hope today? What would you tell me and the rest of the listeners? What do I do next?
Look, I think that the answer to this one is to be prepared to actually share whatever optimism you have developed about betterment of society and the relief of social injustices, and be prepared to talk it up. Don't hide your light under a bushel. I think it's very important to give witness. If it's a relationship to actual individuals, your family, your friends, be a bit demonstrative, It doesn't really hurt to tell a kid or a grandkid, gosh, sorry you failed that exam, but you can do better. It can be, encouragement, positive, hopeful vibes in your daily life. You've got to project, I think, that the lessons that life have taught you, and mine's a pretty long life. I'm just within a few weeks of my 84th birthday. But the lessons of life have taught you are more positive than negative. I understand people who get downtrodden by, the vexations of life and the difficulties of life. But by enunciating that, by living that, by volubly sharing that, they're really not helping anyone. They're certainly not helping themselves. Whereas if you can take action by sharing your hopefulness in your everyday life, by recognizing that you see the world positively, starting with, the people that you meet every day, your friends, your neighbors, your children, your grandchildren, and project this hopefulness, then your life is going to have a bit of an impact, and it will not be wasted.
You're so right. It is the people who smile at me from the next car over in traffic or through the store window that make me remember at the end of the day, that was a nice person. That was really warm. It was encouraging, and just a simple smile. But they're going out of their way to shed some light on another human, and I appreciate that. That's a great action point.
I think that's absolutely right. I can tell you a funny little story. When I was a schoolboy growing up in Sydney, as it happened, we moved to Melbourne in my mid to late 20s. My mother was sort of very outgoing and voluble. And we'd be sitting in the train, and we'd be sitting in the train going from our home into the city, into Sydney. And she'd smile at the person, total stranger, sitting next to her on the train. I would be immensely embarrassed. And she would say, now, sitting next to me is my son, Gusti. He's very clever. He came ducks to school last year, blah, blah, blah. And on it would go. And she was just like that with everybody, And the number of people, when she died after a long life, that came to me and said, she's been such a positive influence in my life.
That's a great example. What a great legacy. Well, how can people connect to you? If we want to find out more of what you're doing or follow you along in your travels, how do we do that?
I'm a terrible person on social media, Chris. I haven't got a blog. I haven't got my own thing. But in point of fact, I will be easily contactable via Wikipedia, easily contactable via the Gates Foundation or via the World Health Organization. And I'm just planning to keep on doing roughly what I'm doing, because at 84 I'm also spending a little bit more time at home now with the family and sharing hope with them.
Well, that's perfect. We will put your links from the World Health Organization, the Gates Foundation, and your Wikipedia connections there on the show notes page at isharehope.com, and you'll be able to find so much more information about Sir Gus.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
That's excellent.
So we ask each person this, sir, what is your favorite thing to listen to when you need to just lift your spirits, get pumped up? What kind of music do you like?
Well, I told you I was Austrian. And I said to myself when Chris asked me that, it's going to have to be Austrian. So I'm going to say to you, Franz Schubert's wonderful song cycle called Winter Journey. It's long. It is for singing by a solo tenor, and it is just that. It is life's journey. It is deeply, deeply moving. And while it has aspects in it of being quite sad, it's also immensely hopeful. So have a listen to Franz Schubert's Winter Journey.
I will. I'll do it, and then I'll also put a link to where to find that music on our show notes page as well, so we can share that too. Thank you, sir. Wonderful. Love it. Love the music and love the steps. Such easy to follow. Just encourage other people with what you have to encourage them with. And sir, you have been just fantastic. Sir Gus Nossal, world-renowned immunologist and head of so many things for the Gates Foundation, World Health Organization, and so much more. Your life has been impacted by this guy, even if you don't know who he is, but now you do. Sir, thank you for your time. I really appreciate the effort and the energy you've spent for your whole life doing so much around the globe.
And thank you very much for this excellent program, and very good luck as you work towards its conclusion.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Bye, and thank you so much. All the very best.
Same to you.
You've just listened to I Share Hope. If you're ready to make a change, head to our website at isharehope.com and claim your free copy of the Top 10 Actions of Hope from World Leaders to use hope in your own life. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right.
Everybody does.
Okay. I really appreciate that. Well, Gus, let me jump into the interview then. You're extremely well known in the world of immunology, and most people in the world are probably not as aware of immunology as they should be because they don't realize how much it impacts their everyday life. But you are an Order of the British Empire. You've been knighted in the British Empire. You are a Companion of the Order of Australia. You won the Albert Einstein World Award of Science. This list goes on and on. I'm just looking through Wikipedia and website after website after website about.
You don't want to believe everything you read, you know, Chris.
Well, if it's in the internet, it must be true, right?
Let me tell your colleagues, all of us in the I Share Hope podcast, just a little bit more about immunology, and that will also segue into telling you a little bit more about myself.
Good.
I have actually had two professional lives. They're related, but they're different. Now, the first goes on for 40 years, and that was me as a medical trade full-time on global public health. Now, there and then, fate took an entirely unexpected hand, and if you want to talk about hope, this is about as hopeful a thing as could have happened to anyone. Would you believe that someone or another from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation cottoned onto my name and said, oh, here's good old Gus, you know, he's been on this WHO kick for so long. Why don't we make him the chairman of the Strategic Advisory Committee or Council of the Bill and Melinda Gates Children's Vaccine Program?
Wow.
Now, the foundation is a quite amazing body. It spends close to $4 billion a year for the welfare of humankind. And Bill Gates is on record as saying that this immunization project, which I had the enormously good fortune of helping to bring into the world — I was one of the obstetricians for the project — is the most successful thing he's ever done. It's the most successful program of the Gates Foundation. And it's got a technical name. Its technical name is the Gavi Alliance. That simply means the Global Alliance for Vaccine Research Worker in the field of immunology. What is immunology? Immunology, simply put, is a study of the natural defense system of the body, that which you have within you that keeps you free of disease, that allows vaccines to work, and that also even provides a certain bulwark against cancer. Now, that natural immune system is based on cells that we call white cells of the blood, and if you want to be a bit technical, they're called lymphocytes. And would you believe that I've spent 40 years of my misspent life studying those damn little white cells that are keeping you free of disease?
I really appreciate that. It's working.
From the point of view of saying, how does it work? Why is it so? That which in the trade we call fundamental research. And that is really, as it were, the first and probably the most important part of my life. However, there is a second thread. And I was extremely lucky to be in possession of this second thread when I came to my retirement 19 years ago, and therefore was no longer able to conduct to actually share whatever optimism you have developed about betterment of society and the relief of social injustices. Whereas if you can take action by sharing your hopefulness in your everyday life, by recognizing that you see the world positively, project this hopefulness, then your life is going to have a bit of an impact, and it will not be wasted. The world does have problems. If we attack them with goodwill and with hope, we'll be able to make an impact here and there around the edges of these problems. I'm Gus Nossal. I'm an Australian medical scientist, and I share hope.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
It is truly a delight for me. It really is. Make sure that I get this right. I'm horrible at pronouncing any other name but my own. And so I want to make sure that I hear yours right.
I think you should just call me Gus.
Gus.
Laboratory Benched Research. And that is related to the importance of immunology in public health. Now, this comes with a little bit of a story, a little bit of a self-story attached to it. I guess as a person of hope, I've always had a bit of a bleeding heart. And would you believe, since about 1964, I've been on a variety of World Health Organization committees trying to see how can this knowledge that I've accumulated benefit the people in the developing countries. They don't enjoy the same high standard of health that we do in the West, and they definitely can benefit tremendously from some of the tools that medical research has provided, particularly in the field of vaccines. So this significant part-time involvement in vaccines, in advocacy for third world health, in trying to boost up life expectancy in the third world, was a minor thread while I was actually earning a salary. But I had the good fortune of being able to make my night job my day job when I retired and really concentrate